President Joe Biden commuted the sentences for 37 out of 40 federal inmates on death row, converting them to life in prison without parole. These commutations are sure to frustrate Trump's plans to resume federal executions. Unlike executive orders, a president's successor cannot reverse clemency decisions. Trump restarted federal executions after a nearly 20-year pause during his first term in office. Biden put federal executions on hold when he took office in January 2021. The president released this statement about why he commuted the sentences, stating, "I've dedicated my career to reducing violent crime and ensuring a fair and effective justice system. Today, I am commuting the sentences of 37 of the 40 individuals on federal death row to life sentences without the possibility of parole. These commutations are consistent with the moratorium my administration has imposed on federal executions in cases other than terrorism and hate-motivated mass murder. Make no mistake, I condemn these murders, grieve for the victims of their despicable acts, and ache for all the families who have suffered unimaginable and irreparable loss. But guided by my conscience and my experience as a public defender, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, vice president, and now president, I am more convinced than ever that we must stop the use of the death penalty at the federal level. In good conscience, I cannot stand back and let a new administration resume executions that I halted." Earlier this month, Biden commuted the sentences of nearly 1,500 people and pardoned 39 more convicted of non-violent crimes. He also issued a full and unconditional pardon of his son, Hunter Biden. Monday's decision does not apply to cases of terrorism or hate-motivated mass murder. It leaves out three of the most well-known men on federal death row. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, convicted for his involvement in the bombing at the Boston Marathon finish line in 2013. Dylan Roof, convicted for the shooting spree at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015. And Robert Bowers, who was convicted for the mass shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh in 2018. Joining me now is Patrice Willoughby, NAACP's Chief of Policy and Legislative Affairs. Patrice, I'm so happy that you're joining us tonight. And for many people out there, some are frustrated, but for many people who have been following this is a promise that has been kept for Biden that he fulfilled.
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you for having me this evening. We are extremely happy and thankful that the president has commuted these sentences because when the Biden-Harris administration came into office, they focused on equity. And we know that there is a lack of equity throughout the criminal justice system, which really has affected Black communities much more so than anyone else. And so it's only right that at this point, right before the holidays, that the president takes steps to commute these death sentences to life.
And what do you say to people who feel like, whoa, he's just trying to make up for what he did with Hunter Biden, and he's just trying to get people to not really pay attention? For many of us who are familiar with what Biden is talking about, he's always been passionate about this because he stopped this as soon as he came into office. What do you say to people who say that this is just a last minute thing and he's trying to cover up his other pardons?
Well, I say this, we understand a lot more about criminal justice now than was in 1994 when the crime bill was enacted. And we also know that that bill resulted in a large number of Black folks who were caught up in the criminal justice system. We are only 14% of the population, but 40% of the federal prison population. And in taking this step, the president is continuing what began with advocacy and activism that was trying to do things like equalize the crack to powder sentencing disparity, as well as do the unfinished business of the 2018 First Step Act, so that a lot of the people that would have received shorter sentences under that bill are still serving long sentences. So this is just the president moving toward justice and correcting some of the wrongs that have been done.
And what does a step like this look like in the lives of of real families who are pretty much assured that under Trump they were absolutely going to lose their family member should these executions have gone through?
I think it's a really sad legacy that when the last president came into office, one of the things he focused on was executing people. We know that there are sentencing disparities and that Black people receive longer sentences than white people for similar crimes, and that's reflected in the federal prison system as well. And so for those people who received either disproportionately long sentences or who were on death row and might have resulted in having a lighter sentence or life in prison, it's going to mean the world to their families for their sentences to be commuted.
And how do you feel when you think about some of the international pressure that was on Biden? I mean, the Pope spoke out about this. So many different advocacy organizations spoke out about this. Do you feel like this is something that was weighing heavily on Biden's conscience because of that international pressure, or this is just something he was going to stay consistent with regardless of what was happening outside of what people were saying?
The president is a person of faith. Many of us are people of faith. And I think that there's widespread recognition around the world. We incarcerate more people. We are one of the only countries that still has a federal death penalty. And there's a lot of question as to whether or not the state should be putting people to death. And so I think during this very holy time of the year in the Judeo-Christian tradition, that it's a really important time for the president, and in recognition of his faith and in the redemptive power of forgiveness, as well as coupled with correction, that people should be taken off of death row and receive life imprisonment.
And taking it outside of death row, what are your thoughts about some of Biden's pardons that already? I mean, outside of Hunter Biden, people can talk about that forever, but there have been some other ones that some people consider controversial, such as a judge in Pennsylvania who people say was, selling convictions and the like. What do you think about Biden's overall pardon process? Have you been pleased with it? Is there more that needs to be done? How do you see it?
Well, I think that there's a lot more that can be done, and we hope that the administration will continue with clemency actions until they are out of office. I think that you're never going to please everyone. We could talk about Hunter Biden's pardon, but the fact is that was a politically inspired prosecution. We can talk about the judge. But that is what it is. What's important is that there are over 7,000 cases that the pardon attorney at the Department of Justice has already reviewed. Nonviolent offenses and people who are just waiting to have their sentence either commuted or pardoned. They've been vetted already, and there's a lot more that can be done. What we saw, the first step to bring down that crack powder. Roland then issued a charging memo and equalized sentencing. But there are still people who did not receive the benefit of that 2018 bill. And so they deserve justice as well. And we are hoping that the administration goes forward to give clemency to that large group of people.
Joe, the first question is for you.
Hey, kind of a two-part question to help people with their awareness. The NAACP doesn't stop doing work during Republican administrations. So talk a little bit about the battlegrounds where your work will take you during this next 4 years, as well as helping people understand from an awareness standpoint how important it is to be aware of what's going on as it pertains to these particular issues, these particular criminal justice issues, as well as how people can be supportive of your organization, which has a policy wing, which has a legal work wing. Educate us in a way that will allow us to really go forward and say, okay, here's how we need to continue to help, and not just be back and forth with NAACP and similar organizations.
Well, you're absolutely right. The fight never stops, and it hasn't since 1909. We are very concerned about the incoming administration's focus expressed through Project 2025, which is an anti-Black agenda, which is focused on rolling back all of the civil rights progress that has been made since the inception of the NAACP. And so naacp.org is our website. We have a number of tabs that relate to issues and membership. We are an organization where everyone has the opportunity to offer their ideas during the year and to have those ideas adopted as part of our resolutions process. We are a bottom-up organization. That having been said, we watch the federal, we watch the state, and we watch local legislatures because there are many anti-progress initiatives that have been seeded from the federal level down into the states. And so when you hear all of this talk about let's send it back to the states, this is why we had federal law developed. This is why we have civil rights laws in place. And that is to guarantee the civil rights that are enumerated in the Constitution and that we are due and that we have worked to secure over the years.
Thank you.
Julianne?
Yes, just I appreciate the work that the NAACP is doing at this time. It's so very necessary. Questions about the pardons and clemencies. How many people are eligible to pardon? Could Biden do, as Gerald Ford did for draft dodgers, a blanket pardon? Let's say for non-violent drug offenders, for any number of categories. I appreciate the 1,500 and then the 37. But it doesn't seem to go far enough when we look at what we're facing, especially with the incoming administration. So what's the universe of people that Biden could pardon, and why would he or not do so?
Well, Dr. Melville, that's a really great question. There are at least 7,000 people who have applied for clemency of some type. And that's either to have a pardon where the legal liability is released or to have their sentence commuted. That is either made subject to what they've already served or have it wiped out or have it reduced. Of those 7,000, we know that there are bulk of those are nonviolent offenses because the pardon attorney has already reviewed them, and he could do a blanket clemency for nonviolent offenses. So, for example, we know that there has been a disproportionate focus on cannabis and marijuana before medical marijuana and then adult use was normalized in many states. There are still people behind bars serving sentences for nonviolent marijuana, cannabis offenses. They should not be in prison anymore. There are people who should be released on compassionate release because the federal prison system is characterized with a lot of very long sentences, as well as mandatory minimum sentences with a lot of folks serving time that is over 20 years of age, or 20 years in length. And so there are older people who don't pose any type of threat who are still in federal prison. And, there are multiple categories of these nonviolent offenses that the president could wipe out. Why he doesn't do it? Who knows? I think that he's taken a really good step today, and we are happy about the death row commutations, but there is a lot more that can be done with just the swoop of a pen.
Thank you.
Mustafa.
Yeah. It's great to see everybody. My question is around the history of pardons, especially in relationship to our communities. And often folks will sometimes think that we disproportionately are being given opportunities. Could you talk a little bit about, for the various folks, the various groups that are out there, Black folks, white folks, Latino folks, so forth and so on, how we end up benefiting from pardons, or if it's, pretty much across the board for folks?
Well, we are disproportionately in the criminal justice system. And so when pardons and commutations are granted, it stands to reason that Black people would receive a great number of them because, for example, 14% of the population, 40% of the federal prison population. I mean, Black men, for example, are 65% more likely to be charged with offenses that carry a mandatory minimum sentence. 53% of men serving sentences of 20 plus years for drug offenses are in federal prison. And so Black men also receive sentences that are 13% longer than their white counterparts. I mean, these are the miscarriages of justice in the criminal justice system. So I wouldn't even characterize it that we're receiving disproportionate benefit. It is, we have suffered disproportionate harm. And the president, in doing these clemency actions, you know, any clemency action is going to result in that harm being mitigated. And so that is really the issue that we should focus on. Why is the criminal justice system so focused on and negatively impacting Black communities? I mean, we know, looking at history, but we should all be focused on eradicating that disparity.
Patrice Willoughby, NAACP's Chief of Policy and Legislative Affairs, thank you so much for your time today, and please keep us posted on your efforts so we can continue to platform your work as well with the NAACP.
Thank you so much for having, and everyone have a good holiday.
Hi, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Fanbase is a free to download, free to use, next generation social media platform that allows anyone to have followers and subscribers on the same page. Fanbase was built through investment dollars from equity crowdfunding from the Jobs Act. People just like you helped build Fanbase, and we're looking for more people to help build Fanbase. We are currently raising $17 million in a Regulation A crowdfund on Start Engine. We've already crossed $2.1 million, but we're looking to raise more capital from people just like you that deserve the opportunity to invest in early stage startups without having to be accredited investors. So right now, I'd like you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase right now, today. And then use Fanbase to connect with friends, grow your audience, and be you without limits.